My name is Veronica, and at 59, I thought I had it all figured out. A successful career, a thriving business, and a marriage that had weathered 3 decades. I met Robert when I was 27. He was a brilliant plastic surgeon with dreams of opening his own clinic. I was a business graduate with a knack for management. We clicked instantly, our ambitions aligning perfectly. Within a year, we were married and working towards our shared goal. Over the next few years, we poured our hearts and souls into establishing our clinic. It wasn't easy, but we made it work. Robert's skill as a surgeon and my business acumen proved to be a winning combination. Slowly but surely, our reputation grew. There was only one cloud on our horizon: children. Or rather, the lack of them. After 2 years of trying, we discovered Robert had fertility issues. The news hit him hard. "I'm sorry, Veronica," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know how much you wanted kids." I hugged him tight. "It's okay, Robert. We have each other, and we have our clinic. That's enough." But was it? There were times when I'd see mothers with their children and feel a pang of regret. I pushed those feelings aside, focusing instead on our growing business. As the years passed, our clinic became one of the most respected in the city. Then, about 6 months ago, I noticed something was off with Robert. His hands, those skilled hands that had transformed countless lives, were starting to shake. "Robert," I said one evening as we were going over some paperwork, "I think you should see a doctor." He brushed me off. "It's just fatigue, Veronica. Nothing a good night's sleep won't fix." But it wasn't just fatigue. The tremors were becoming more frequent, more noticeable. I urged him to get checked out, to consider stepping back from surgeries and focus on administrative work. He wouldn't hear of it. Despite my concerns about Robert's health, we continued to push forward with our plans for the clinic. We needed to upgrade our equipment, expand our services. It would require a significant investment, more than we could manage on our own. That's when I started reaching out to potential investors. It was a long process, filled with meetings, presentations, and negotiations. But finally, after months of work, we had a deal. The day the funds hit our account, I felt a surge of triumph. This was it, the next big step for our clinic. I decided to surprise Robert with the news over lunch. I ordered his favorites from that little Italian place down the street and set everything up in my office. The door opened, and Robert walked in. He looked tired, but his eyes lit up when he saw the spread. "What's all this?" he asked, a smile playing on his lips. I grinned back. "I have some news. The investors came through. The money's in our account. We can order that new equipment we've been eyeing." For a moment, Robert's face lit up with the boyish enthusiasm I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. He swept me into a hug, laughing. "That's fantastic, Veronica. You're amazing, you know that?" I basked in his praise, feeling like we were back on solid ground. Then he pulled back, a mischievous glint in his eye. "I have a surprise for you too," he said. "I want you to meet someone." I raised an eyebrow, curiosity piqued. "Oh, a new client?" He shook his head, a strange smile playing on his lips. "Not exactly. She's our new nurse." Before I could process this information, the door swung open, and in walked a young woman. She couldn't have been more than 22, with long blonde hair, pouty lips, and a figure that screamed recent work done. She flashed a dazzling smile at Robert before turning her gaze to me. "Hi, I'm Ella," she chirped, her voice syrupy sweet. "It's so nice to meet you, Mrs. Henderson." I blinked, taken aback. "I'm sorry, but I don't recall us hiring a new nurse. Especially one so young." Robert cleared his throat. "Well, that's the surprise. Ella here is eager to join our team. She's just completed her nursing courses." "Courses?" I echoed, my eyes narrowing. "Not a full nursing degree?" Ella's smile faltered slightly. "Well, not yet. But I'm a quick learner." And Dr. Henderson says he'll teach me everything I need to know. I turned to Robert, disbelief etched on my face. Can I speak with you privately for a moment? We stepped out into the hallway, leaving Ella in my office. As soon as the door closed, I rounded on Robert. What the hell are you thinking? I hissed. We can't hire someone with no experience, especially not in a medical setting. Robert had the decency to look sheepish. Look, I know it's unorthodox, but Ella is bright and eager to learn. She was a patient of mine, breast augmentation, and she was so impressed with our work that she wanted to be part of it. I felt my blood pressure rising. Robert, this is a professional medical facility, not a fan club. We can't just hire someone because they like their boob job. His face hardened. Keep your voice down. I've made my decision. Ella starts next week. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. If you hire her, I won't work with her. It's me or her, Robert. I expected him to back down, to realize how ridiculous this whole situation was. Instead, his next words hit me like a slap in the face. Then I guess you should pack your things, Veronica. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. 32 years of marriage, of building a life and a business together, and he was choosing this girl over me? Without another word, I turned and walked back into my office. Ella was still there, examining her reflection in the window. Well, I said, my voice tight. It seems congratulations are in order. The job is yours. I grabbed my purse and coat. As I walked out of the clinic, I could feel their eyes on me, Robert's conflicted, Ella's triumphant. I held my head high, refusing to let them see how shaken I was. The days following my confrontation with Robert at the clinic dragged on endlessly. Surely, I thought, Robert would come to his senses. He'd realize he needed me, not just as his wife, but as the backbone of our business. But a week passed, and still no word from Robert. I was beginning to wonder if I should reach out again when my phone rang. It was Sarah, an old friend who frequented the same social circles as Robert and me. Veronica? It's Sarah. I'm not sure how to say this, but, do you know your husband is getting married? The world seemed to tilt on its axis. What? Sarah, what are you talking about? Sarah's voice was hesitant, laden with discomfort. I saw Robert yesterday. He was at Bella's bridal with a young woman. They were choosing a wedding dress. The conversation that followed was a blur. I thanked Sarah mechanically and hung up, my mind reeling. Without thinking, I grabbed my car keys and headed for the clinic. I marched straight to Robert's office, not bothering to knock. He looked up as I entered, a smug smile playing on his lips. Veronica, I suppose we should discuss the details. Ella and I are getting married. She's pregnant. The words hit me like a physical blow. I sank into the chair opposite him, struggling to breathe. Pregnant? But, how? You're... Not anymore, apparently, he said with a chuckle. Ella's been giving me some special supplements. Seems they'd done the trick. I stared at him, this stranger wearing my husband's face. In that moment, I realized that the man I'd loved for over 3 decades was gone. This person before me was someone else entirely. I've had my lawyer draw up the divorce papers, Robert continued, sliding a folder across the desk. I think you'll find the terms quite generous. Numbly, I opened the folder and scanned the documents. Despite the turmoil in my heart, my business mind kicked in, analyzing the terms. He was offering me our house, the apartment we rented out, substantial financial compensation, and alimony. In exchange, he would retain full ownership of the clinic and our other business assets. With a steady hand that belied my inner turmoil, I signed the papers. As I stood to leave, a final concern nagged at me. Robert, your health. The tremors in your hands. You really should see a doctor. Maybe consider stepping back from surgeries for a while. He laughed, the sound grating on my nerves. Oh, Veronica. Always the worrier. I'm fine. I feel young again, successful. Unlike some of us who are clearly ready for retirement. The days following the divorce settlement stretched out before me like an endless, empty road. For the first time in decades, I found myself without purpose, without a job to pour my energy into. The silence of my house was deafening. Initially, I tried to fill the void by visiting friends. But as I sat in their living rooms, nursing cups of tea that had long gone cold, I realized my mistake. These were our friends, mine and Robert's. Every conversation inevitably circled back to the upcoming wedding. I heard the bride's dress is being flown in from Paris. Can you imagine? One would say, voice hushed as if imparting a great secret. Then would come the sympathetic looks, the gentle pats on my hand. Oh, but how are you holding up, dear? It must be so difficult. Their words, meant to comfort, felt like sandpaper against my raw emotions. The pitying smiles, the understanding nods, it was all too much. Gradually, I began to withdraw, declining invitations and screening calls. Alone in the house that now felt too big for just me, I found myself wandering from room to room, touching familiar objects that now seemed to belong to another life. In the study, my eyes fell on an old easel tucked away in the corner, gathering dust. Painting. I used to love it, before the clinic consumed all my time and energy. On a whim, I pulled out the easel, found some old canvases and paints, and set up by the large bay window in the living room. 2 months slipped by in this fashion. I was by no means healed, but I was coping. Then came the call that would change everything once again. Ms. Henderson? This is Dr. Emily Chen from Radiant Transformations Clinic. I hope I'm not disturbing you. I recognized the name. Radiant Transformations was Robert's main competitor in the city. Not at all, Dr. Chen. How can I help you? There was a slight pause. Well, Ms. Henderson, we've heard some rumors. Is it true that you're no longer working at Henderson Plastic Surgery? And that you and Dr. Henderson have separated? I took a deep breath. Yes, that's correct. We're divorced, actually. I see, Dr. Chen's voice was carefully neutral. In that case, Ms. Henderson, I have a proposition for you. We've always admired your work in practice management. Would you be interested in joining our team here at Radiant Transformations? The offer took me by surprise. For a moment, I was speechless. Then, a slow smile spread across my face. I would be very interested, Dr. Chen. When would you like to meet to discuss details? The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Meetings, paperwork, getting to know my new team. For the first time in months, I felt alive again, energized. It was during this busy period that I happened to catch a news segment one evening. There, splashed across my TV screen, were photos of Robert and Ella, sun-kissed and smiling on a beach in the Maldives. The ticker at the bottom of the screen proclaimed, "Local plastic surgeon weds in lavish Maldives ceremony." I expected the sight to hurt, to reopen wounds that had barely begun to heal. Instead, I felt nothing. No pain, no anger, not even resentment. Just a vague sense of pity for the man who had thrown away decades of partnership for a fleeting infatuation. A month had passed. Life at Radiant Transformations was going well, and I was finally starting to feel like myself again. Then, on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Is this Veronica? A young, slightly shrill voice came through the speaker. It took me a moment to place it. Ella? I said, disbelief coloring my tone. What do you want? It's Robert, she said, her voice trembling. He's in trouble. A surgery went wrong. A facelift for some big shot's wife. Her face, it's all messed up. Her husband is threatening to sue us, to ruin the clinic. You have to come and fix this. The audacity of her request left me momentarily speechless. When I found my voice, it was cold and firm. I don't have to do anything, Ella. I don't work there anymore, remember? But you always handled this stuff, she whined. Robert needs you. I took a deep breath, tamping down my anger. I warned Robert about his tremors. I told him to see a doctor, to stop performing surgeries. It was clear he was developing symptoms of Parkinson's disease. But he wouldn't listen. Parkinson's? Ella scoffed. Don't be ridiculous. You're just a jealous old woman who can't stand to see Robert happy and successful. The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at the phone, a mixture of emotions swirling within me. Concern for the patient, anger at Ella's words, and a grim satisfaction at being proven right about Robert's condition. Shaking my head, I turned back to my work. Whatever mess Robert had gotten himself into, it wasn't my problem anymore. A week later, my phone rang again. This time, it was a number I recognized all too well. Veronica? Robert's voice sounded strained, desperate. I need your help. I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. It's the clinic reports, he said. I can't make sense of them. You've always handled this stuff. Could you come in and take a look? Part of me wanted to refuse outright, to tell him that his problems were no longer my concern. But another part, the part that had built that clinic from the ground up, couldn't bear the thought of it falling apart. Fine, I said curtly. I'll be there in an hour. Robert looked haggard, with dark circles under his eyes and a pallor to his skin that spoke of sleepless nights. But what caught my attention were his hands, trembling visibly as he shuffled papers on his desk. As I pored over the documents, a grim picture began to emerge. The clinic's finances were in disarray. But more alarmingly, there was a glaring discrepancy in the accounts. Robert, I said slowly, looking up at him. What happened to the money from the investors? The funds for the new equipment? He wouldn't meet my eyes. I had to use it for other things. Other things? I pressed, my voice hardening. Like your wedding? My divorce settlement? Robert's face crumpled. I thought I could make it back quickly. If I just did a few more high-profile surgeries. Like the one that went wrong? I said, the pieces falling into place. Robert, this is serious. This is misuse of funds. The investors could sue you for this. I know, he exploded, his trembling hands sending papers flying. And now with this botched surgery. Veronica, I'm ruined. They're going to take everything. As I stood there, reports in hand, the office door swung open. Ella sauntered in, her face a mask of haughty disdain that faltered slightly when she saw me. My eyes instinctively dropped to her midsection, and I frowned. Weren't you supposed to be pregnant? I asked, unable to keep the skepticism from my voice. You're not showing at all for someone who should be, 4 months along now? Ella's cheeks flushed, and she unconsciously placed a hand over her flat stomach. It's just not visible yet, she stammered unconvincingly. Ignoring her weak excuse, I turned to Robert. What exactly were those fertility treatments you mentioned? The ones that miraculously cured your infertility? Robert, looking increasingly uncomfortable, gestured vaguely towards Ella. She's been giving them to me. Some kind of herbal supplement, I think. I raised an eyebrow at Ella. Well, care to enlighten us? Reluctantly, Ella reached into her designer purse and pulled out a small pill bottle. She handed it to me, avoiding eye contact. As soon as I read the label, I couldn't help but laugh. Robert, I said, shaking my head, these aren't fertility drugs. They're just run-of-the-mill erectile dysfunction pills. They don't have any effect on actual fertility. Robert's face paled, his eyes darting between me and Ella. But she said. She lied, I said flatly. Then, a more serious thought occurred to me. Robert, you shouldn't be taking these, especially not with your condition. They can exacerbate the symptoms of Parkinson's disease. They might even be speeding up its progression. The color drained from Robert's face as the implications of my words sank in. He opened his mouth, likely to berate Ella, when his phone rang. The caller ID showed it was his lawyer. Robert answered, his voice shaky. Hello? Yes, this is Dr. Henderson. As he listened, I watched the last vestiges of color leave his face. His free hand, already trembling, began to shake so violently that he had to set it on the desk to steady it. I see, he said weakly. Yes, I understand. Thank you for letting me know. He ended the call and sat there, staring blankly at the phone in his hand. Robert? I prompted after a moment of heavy silence. What is it? He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and desperation that I'd never seen before. It's the investors, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. They want to conduct a full audit of the clinic. They're specifically interested in how their funds for the new equipment were spent. The silence that followed the lawyer's call was deafening. I could almost hear the gears turning in Robert's head as he desperately searched for a way out of this mess. Suddenly, he looked up at me, his eyes wild with desperation. Veronica, he said, his voice trembling. I need your help. The house, or the apartment, could you sign them over to me? I could sell them, pay back the investors, and save the clinic. I stared at him, incredulous. Are you serious, Robert? You want me to give you the only things I have left after our divorce? Please, he begged, his facade of confidence completely shattered. If you don't help me, I'll lose everything. The clinic, my reputation. I'll have nothing left. I felt a surge of anger rising within me. And whose fault is that, Robert? You're the one who cheated. You're the one who threw away 32 years of marriage for a pretty young thing who batted her eyelashes at you. You made your bed, now lie in it. Ella, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly piped up. Wait a minute, she said, her eyes narrowing as she looked at Robert. Are you saying you're broke? That there's no money left? Robert turned to her, desperation evident in every line of his face. It's just temporary, sweetheart. We'll get through this together, raise our baby. Ella's laugh cut through his words like a knife. It was a cold, contemptuous sound that made even me flinch. Baby, she sneered. There is no baby, you fool. I made it all up. I thought you were loaded, that I'd be set for life. But you're just a washed-up old man who can't even keep his own clinic afloat. Robert staggered back as if he'd been physically struck. But you said. I lied, Ella said bluntly. And now, I want a divorce. I'll be taking half of everything, including this precious clinic of yours. I couldn't help it, I laughed. Both Robert and Ella turned to look at me, shocked by my outburst. Oh, honey, I said, shaking my head at Ella. The only thing you two will be sharing is debt and legal fees. There's nothing left to take. Robert slumped into his chair, looking utterly defeated. Ella's face contorted with rage as the reality of the situation sank in. I'd seen enough. Without another word, I gathered my things and headed for the door. Behind me, I could hear Ella's shrill voice rising in anger, Robert's pleading responses, but I didn't look back. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Chen at Radiant Transformations. There was a new project she wanted my input on, something that could potentially revolutionize our approach to patient care. Weeks passed, and I threw myself into my work at Radiant Transformations. The new project was challenging and rewarding, allowing me to apply my years of experience in innovative ways. I was so engrossed in my new life that I barely thought about Robert or the old clinic anymore. Then one evening, as I was unwinding with a glass of wine and the evening news, a familiar name caught my attention. The renowned plastic surgeon Dr. Robert Henderson has been sued for medical negligence and deliberate concealment of illness, the anchor announced. I sat up straighter, my wine forgotten as I listened intently. The story unfolded like a tragic play. Robert had been forced to pay substantial financial compensation to the patient whose facelift he had botched. Worse still, the medical board had revoked his license to practice, citing his failure to disclose his Parkinson's diagnosis as a grave breach of professional ethics. As the days went by, more news trickled in. The once prestigious Henderson Plastic Surgery Clinic was hemorrhaging clients. Its reputation, built over decades of hard work, was in tatters. Then came the final blow. The investors, upon discovering the misuse of their funds, sued the clinic. Robert, drowning in debt and legal troubles, had no choice but to sell the clinic to pay off his debts and settle the claims against him. I felt a complex mix of emotions: sadness for the downfall of something I had helped build, anger at Robert's recklessness, and a strange sense of vindication. But mostly, I felt relief that I was no longer entangled in that mess. A few days later, Dr. Chen called me into her office. Her expression was unreadable as I took a seat across from her. "Veronica," she began, "I have some news that might interest you. Radiant Transformations has just acquired a new property." I raised an eyebrow, curious. "Oh?" She smiled. "We've purchased the Henderson Plastic Surgery Clinic." For a moment, I was speechless. Of all the potential buyers, I never imagined it would be Radiant Transformations. "I see," I managed to say. "That's unexpected." Dr. Chen leaned forward, her eyes twinkling. "Here's the thing, Veronica. We need someone to manage this new acquisition. Someone who knows the ins and outs of the place, who can turn it around and restore its reputation. Someone like you." I blinked, taken aback. "Me? But You built that clinic from the ground up," Dr. Chen said softly. "Who better to breathe new life into it?" As her words sank in, I felt a surge of emotions. Fear, excitement, nostalgia, determination, they all swirled within me. But above all, I felt a sense of coming full circle. "I'd be honored," I heard myself say. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Walking back into the clinic that had been my second home for so many years was surreal. There were new challenges, of course: rebuilding the clinic's reputation, reassuring old clients, and integrating with Radiant Transformation systems. But with each passing day, I felt more and more in my element. One evening, as I was locking up the clinic, I paused to look at the new sign above the door. "Radiant Transformations at Henderson," it read. A perfect blend of old and new, just like me. As I drove home, I couldn't help but marvel at the twists and turns my life had taken. A year ago, I had been cast aside, feeling lost and betrayed. Now, I was back where I belonged, stronger and wiser for the experience. My phone buzzed with a message from a friend, inviting me to join a group for a painting class over the weekend. I smiled, realizing I now had the time and freedom to pursue such pleasures. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good. I was happy, truly happy, for the first time in a long while. As I pulled into my driveway, I felt a deep sense of contentment wash over me.